Breaking today, Prince Harry has completely lost the plot. I know many of you will say that happened years ago, but this takes things to a whole new level. The man has, and I genuinely mean this, leaked his own security report, the very report he previously submitted to the government in an attempt to convince you, to convince me, British taxpayers, that we should be footing a bill worth millions upon millions of pounds every year so he can have armed protection wherever he travels across the world. He has conveniently handed this report to his allies at Woke ITV, claiming that he is such a significant terror target ahead of his planned visit next week with Meghan Markle and their two children, Archie and Lilibet. Now, Meghan's real concern isn't terrorism. It's that nobody will show up, or even worse, that she'll be greeted with boos. So she continues encouraging Harry to believe that everyone is out to get him and that terrorists are waiting around every corner. Of course, this is a report that Harry paid to have produced himself, which should immediately raise questions and disqualify it from being treated as objective evidence by the mainstream media. But instead, the woke crowd over at ITV and Good Morning Britain decided it deserved headline treatment, announcing that, just days before Prince Harry is due back in the UK, ITV News had obtained a confidential security report claiming the Duke faces 6 terrorist threats, with 5 of them allegedly originating in Britain. The report, produced by the Sussex's own private security firm, and that's the key detail because they're paying them around $3 million a year, also claims that Harry's protection officers are unable to respond effectively to an armed attack while he is in the UK. Then ITV's royal editor, Chris Shipp, managed to throw away what little credibility he had left by presenting it as fact, claiming Prince Harry's security risk is far greater in Britain than anywhere else, citing multiple terrorist threats allegedly coming from the UK and referring to an FBI warning about an assassination plot linked to his military service in Afghanistan. But Chris Shipp, you know full well that's not the whole story. At the very least, you should be honest with your audience. Everyone knows Harry made himself a far bigger target for Islamist extremists because he proudly revealed in his memoir Spare that he had killed 25 Taliban fighters. That disclosure wasn't just insensitive and deeply inappropriate, it was also embarrassing for the British Army. More importantly, it placed a target squarely on his own back. And remember, all of this happened while he was no longer a working royal, but a private citizen living in America and earning huge sums of money. Yet despite all that, Chris Shipp went on ITV News and attempted to present this privately commissioned report as though it should be treated as a serious and credible piece of evidence.
What you've learned.
So, Nina, as you say, Prince Harry is due back next week. What we don't know at this point is he going to come back on his own, or is he going to come back with Meghan and the children, which was his plan, and that's what he wants to do. The reason why he's having to make this decision is because he thought he'd get a change in his security apparatus when he's in the UK, and he's now been told he won't. So what we've seen is a report that was submitted by Prince Harry's security team to the committee here in the UK that decides who gets what when it comes to royal protection.
But there has been a huge amount of backlash today against Chris Shipp for treating this report so seriously. As Richard Eden of the Daily Mail put it, if this is really the case, wouldn't it have been sensible for Harry not to boast in his memoir about how many Afghans he killed? Tory Buckhe wrote on X. So unemployed Prince Harry gets a junk security report written for him, and Chris Shipp promotes it as though Dumbo is some major world leader. What an absolute farce. And royal YouTube star and outspoken contributor. According to Taz, made the point that if Harry genuinely believes there is such a serious threat against his family in the UK, then why on earth would he bring his children here? She argued that either he never intended to bring Archie and Lilibet and has simply used them to pressure RAVEC and emotionally blackmail his father, or he knows deep down that there is no significant threat and is still using the children to get what he wants. She even went further, expressing concern that Harry could try to engineer some kind of false flag incident. She said, "I can see these two harming others around them to prove to the Home Office that he is a target. It sounds like Harry is foreshadowing it." Now, Rafe Heidel-Manku is a royal historian. And Rafe, before we get into the details of this bombshell ITV report, I think we need to discuss the wider context here. ITV, as a news organization, is simply accepting this report at face value, even though it was produced by a team of security experts whom Prince Harry pays around $3 million a year. And my belief, Rafe, and this hasn't been reported by the mainstream media, is that the real reason Harry wants protected status in the UK is because once you get it, you effectively keep it for life, and you keep it wherever you go in the world. I know for a fact, Rafe, that former prime ministers retain security for years, even though there are periodic reviews. That means it doesn't matter where they are in the world, that protection follows them. If a former prime minister goes on holiday to the Maldives in a few weeks' time, taxpayers still fund the security that accompanies them. It costs millions upon millions of pounds. And that's what makes this so extraordinary, Rafe. Harry is no longer a working member of the royal family. He has publicly attacked this country, attacked the monarchy, and even tried to damage the institution with accusations of racism that many people believe were false. Yet despite all of that, he still wants British taxpayers to foot the bill. And this is the key point, Rafe. It's not just about receiving security while he is in Britain. If he were granted that protected status, he could receive taxpayer-funded security wherever he is in the world.
So, of course, the argument is quite clear. With the privilege of getting security like that comes responsibility. There's no free lunch in this world. And well, he had the benefit of enjoying a free lunch when he was young,
Exactly. But they don't want to do that, Rafe, because they're using this visit as a way to avoid paying for it themselves. Here's the reality. They're under serious financial pressure. We know their private security costs around $3 million a year, and they simply can't keep footing that bill forever. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why they're trying to push the British government into taking over the cost, so they no longer have to. By the way, I'm really glad you mentioned Catherine. The Three Peaks Challenge is a great example, but I actually think Wimbledon tells us even more, Rafe. Just look at what happened today. She's sitting on court 18, if I'm remembering correctly, and people are literally walking right behind her. Can you see that? As Roy Sage pointed out, she's sitting there with members of the public passing by without any drama or extraordinary security measures. This is the future Queen of England. Meanwhile, Harry is trying to paint the picture that he's facing some extreme level of danger. I genuinely think a lot of this comes down to the fact that he's become increasingly detached from reality. There are also the psychedelics he's openly admitted to using, along with marijuana. He's spoken publicly about both. And of course, I think Meghan Markle has played a significant role in feeding his paranoia. Think back to the Netflix Harry and Meghan documentary, Rafe. She seemed determined to convince him that the paparazzi following their car through New York was something he should genuinely fear. She kept reinforcing that sense of danger. The irony, of course, is that this is the same Meghan who, in the past, seemed more than happy for photographers to know exactly where she was. Hello, paparazzi. I'll be at Soho House around this time. That's what makes it so ironic. And if you're a supportive spouse, surely you'd be saying, darling, it's New York. Celebrities get photographed all the time. It's nothing unusual. But that wasn't the message she was giving him. Instead, she appeared to encourage those fears and make him feel even more threatened. I do think that's been a major factor in all of this. Absolutely, and of course she's terrified of being booed. But anyway, Rafe, let's go through this report because Chris Shipp appears to be treating it as though it's completely credible. This is the report that was submitted to RAVEC, the government committee responsible for deciding whether Harry qualifies for state-funded security. Chris Shipp claims Harry faces an elevated threat from terrorism, saying he's the subject of 6 terror plots, with 5 allegedly originating in the UK. According to Shipp, that's based on what he describes as a highly sensitive security report obtained by ITV News. Now let's be clear, this wasn't leaked by the government. It came directly from Prince Harry and his own team to Chris Shipp over at Woke ITV. Shipp goes on to say these revelations come as the Duke of Sussex prepares to return to Britain and is still undecided about whether to bring his family because he supposedly believes the UK is unsafe. Just remember, they've happily traveled to Colombia, Nigeria, and Chicago. Yet somehow it's Britain that Harry considers too dangerous. The report itself was commissioned by Harry's own private security company. It outlines dozens of alleged threats and possible attacks against the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, including an Al-Qaeda document that reportedly called for Harry's assassination. That report was then submitted to the UK Security Committee responsible for deciding whether Harry should receive taxpayer-funded police protection while in Britain. According to the report, the private security firm claims it does not currently know the whereabouts of 4 convicted individuals allegedly connected to terrorist threats against Harry. The confidential risk assessment, prepared for the prince back in February, was submitted to RAVEC, the committee that decides which senior politicians and members of the royal family qualify for Home Office-funded police protection. A copy of the report, obtained by ITV News, claims there have been at least 6 plots targeting Harry involving both jihadist and right-wing extremists, similar to threats previously directed at other prominent British figures. The American security firm employed by Harry and Meghan argues that the greatest danger facing the Sussex family comes from terrorism, particularly so-called grassroots or lone actor attacks. The confidential threat assessment also states that the Metropolitan Police are reportedly aware of almost 500 potential stalkers connected to the royal family, with roughly half said to have demonstrated some level of threat toward Harry, Meghan, and their 2 children. Despite Harry and his children being 5th, 6th, and 7th in the line of succession, his automatic royal security was removed in 2020. Harry maintains he was promised an annual review, but claims that no such review has ever taken place. He's due to return to Britain for a series of engagements, and had previously indicated that Meghan and the children would accompany him. However, according to Harry's office, they received a letter late last week informing them that they would simply be given the phone number of a police liaison officer during the visit, and nothing beyond that. I have to admit, I almost love that response, because it's a subtle bit of shade from the British government and the police. It's basically their way of saying, "We're not buying into this. Here's a contact number if you need it." In other words, they're treating Harry no differently from Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, or any other wealthy, high-profile individual who visits the UK sponsor segment. Before we continue, we've partnered with Gundry MD to bring you today's sponsor. Would you believe that one of the healthiest foods on the planet is probably already sitting in your kitchen? It's true, and it's not some trendy new superfood. It's olive oil. Most people only think of olive oil as something to cook with, but there are plenty of other ways it may help you look and feel younger. Not only can it support a more youthful appearance, but it may also offer benefits for your overall health. According to Dr. Stephen Gundry, a well-known cardiothoracic surgeon, nutrition expert, and health advocate, incorporating high-quality olive oil into your daily routine could be one of the simplest health habits you adopt. Whether that's taking a small amount each day or even keeping a bottle in your bathroom cabinet, he believes quality matters. The question, though, is which olive oil should you actually choose? While almost any olive oil provides some benefits, not every brand is created equally. It's a massive industry, and with so many options lining supermarket shelves, it's no surprise that some manufacturers may cut corners to maximize profits. When Dr. Gundry looked into the industry more closely, he says he was shocked by what he found. He also believes that truly premium olive oils can deliver significant benefits with just a few tablespoons each week. To help consumers understand the difference, he's released a presentation explaining his research and exactly what to look for. The video has attracted millions of views, and if you'd like to watch it, you'll find the link in the description below. Many people who followed his recommendations say choosing a better quality olive oil made a noticeable difference to their health. Now back to the story. Chris Shipp went on to explain that Harry's private security company already provides personnel whenever he travels internationally. However, the report argues that those officers cannot carry firearms while operating in the UK. Because of that, the report concludes that British authorities are in a much stronger position to provide comprehensive protection. It ultimately argues that Harry's private security officers would be unable to respond adequately to an armed attack carried out by a terrorist, a criminal, or a mentally unstable individual. Only UK police officers who have authorization from RAVEC are permitted to carry firearms while protecting the Duke. The report therefore concludes that the only effective way to reduce the remaining risks is for Harry to receive state-funded security. Well, what a surprise. That just happens to be the conclusion Harry spent a great deal of money paying for. The document also argues that although Harry stepped down as a working royal, he is still the king's son and remains a symbol of the crown. Personally, I'd dispute that, but that's clearly the position being put forward. It goes on to claim that extremists who hold grievances against Britain, including jihadists and others opposed to the Commonwealth, continue to pose a significant threat regardless of Harry's current role. According to the report, he has remained a target ever since serving in Afghanistan. It states that in 2023, the FBI informed Harry's security team that intelligence received from an overseas agency indicated senior al-Qaeda figures had circulated a document on a private Telegram channel specifically mentioning the assassination of the Duke of Sussex. That document allegedly encouraged supporters living in Western countries to target military personnel who had served in Afghanistan, supported Israel, or were viewed as having killed Muslims. Within that context, Harry's name was reportedly mentioned because of his military service in Afghanistan. Although it's interesting, isn't it, that Harry doesn't appear to believe FBI protection funded by the American taxpayer is the answer. The report also lists other incidents, including an alleged attempt in May 2023 by a man carrying a hammer and duct tape to gain access to Harry and Meghan's home in Montecito. Once again, it's worth pointing out that this incident happened in the United States, not in the United Kingdom. It also references individuals described as fixated on Harry, including an incident earlier this year when a woman known to the Metropolitan Police's Fixated Threat Assessment Center twice gained access to the Royal Courts of Justice during proceedings involving Harry. Now, I've covered this before and completely dismantled the argument. This is simply a member of the Sussex Squad, a very obsessive fan. She's not some credible threat. In fact, Chris Shipp has even been photographed with her, and I've shown those images on previous programs. There she is. Honestly, this is scraping the barrel. This isn't evidence of some major security crisis. It's essentially a fan. Yes, I'd agree you'd have to be a little obsessive to travel around the world following Prince Harry, but that's very different from trying to assassinate him. Shipp continues by saying Harry's private security company is currently monitoring 28 individuals who have allegedly displayed concerning stalking behavior towards the Sussex family. The report then claims the security risk to Harry and Meghan is considerably higher in the UK, because most of the serious threats are said to have originated there. It also argues that because Harry no longer has state-funded protection, anyone wishing to target the royal family could view him as its most vulnerable member. And this, for me, is where we reach the heart of the issue, the paranoia. Harry appears convinced that senior palace aides surrounding his father and even his brother, Prince William, are actively trying to prevent him from receiving taxpayer-funded security. William has absolutely nothing to do with these decisions, yet Harry continues dragging him into the narrative. King Charles, who has been in Scotland this week, hasn't seen Archie and Lilibet since 2022. Buckingham Palace has repeatedly made it clear that decisions regarding security are entirely the responsibility of the Home Office and that the king has no involvement. That's correct. The Home Office has simply reiterated that its protective security arrangements are rigorous and proportionate, but declined to comment on individual cases. Rafe, I honestly struggle to think of anything more extraordinary than this. Public figures almost never discuss their security arrangements publicly, and there's a very good reason why. I've personally had someone jailed for making threats against me in the past. I don't constantly talk about it or advertise it. If you spend your entire life searching for potential threats, then people like you, me, Tommy Robinson, or countless others could easily convince ourselves never to leave the house. Sadly, this seems to be all Harry has left. To compile a document supposedly intended only for the British government, then leak it to a British media outlet while constantly claiming to despise the press. It's genuinely bizarre. It's almost as though he's inviting attention by saying, "Look how dangerous my situation is. Attack me so everyone finally agrees I deserve taxpayer-funded security." What exactly is he thinking? It almost feels like he's setting himself up to say, "I warned everyone I was at risk. I told you this would happen. If anything occurs, it's your fault because you refused to protect me." Paranoia really does seem to sit at the center of all this. He appears convinced that his own family are somehow influencing RAVEC behind the scenes. We even know he incorrectly claimed that Prince William had representation on the committee, despite there being no evidence that was ever true. That belief seems to underpin a great deal of his thinking. And you made another important point earlier. I'd argue that someone like Elon Musk is probably at far greater risk, particularly given the hostility directed towards him by certain extremist groups. Yet, if Elon Musk visits Britain privately, he doesn't automatically receive state-funded protection. He relies on his own security arrangements. So why does Prince Harry believe he's entitled to a higher level of taxpayer-funded protection than someone in that position? Exactly. And this is the key point, Rafe, sorry to interrupt, but it's important. If there is a genuine, specific threat, particularly a credible terrorist threat, the authorities will provide protection immediately. Harry's team keeps repeating the claim that he would be left completely unprotected, and that simply isn't true. That's the problem. They continue pushing a narrative that doesn't reflect reality, and too many journalists accept it without asking the obvious questions. They keep repeating the line, Taylor Swift gets government security when she visits the UK. That's simply not the full story, Rafe. Taylor Swift received additional security because there was a very specific terrorist threat. There had been an alleged al-Qaeda plot connected to her concerts in Vienna, Austria. Then, of course, you had the horrific Southport stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. To ensure the Eras Tour could go ahead, and let's remember those concerts generated well over £1 billion for the British economy, the government provided enhanced security for that specific tour. That was because there was a clear and credible threat. If Prince Harry were facing the same kind of specific intelligence, he would receive exactly the same level of protection. Exactly. I was about to make that very point. One of the strengths of this country is that we have some of the best intelligence services anywhere in the world. MI5, MI6, and GCHQ are exceptionally capable. I'm completely confident that genuine threats are identified well in advance, and when they are, the appropriate level of security is put in place. That's always been RAVEC's position. Every visit is assessed individually, and the security arrangements are based on the intelligence available at that particular time. As you said, many of the risks highlighted in this report simply wouldn't reach the threshold that our security services would consider sufficient for enhanced protection. The report talks about hundreds of suspicious individuals, but what exactly qualifies someone as suspicious? Who is making that determination? Much of what they're referring to involves so-called fixated individuals. These are often obsessive fans, stalkers, or people suffering from mental health disorders. We've seen the same thing with celebrities for decades. People followed the Rolling Stones around the world for years. That doesn't mean they were trying to murder Mick Jagger. Exactly. And it's also worth remembering that Britain is a country where firearms are relatively uncommon. One of the unfortunate reasons knife crime is such a problem is because guns simply aren't part of everyday life here in the way they are elsewhere. Now, to be fair, Islamist terrorism remains a genuine concern. Absolutely, but as you've said before, there are arguably greater risks in places like the United States, Colombia, or South Africa, where gun crime is significantly more prevalent and the overall threat environment is very different. As for the claims about far-right extremists, I don't find those particularly convincing. Anyone who studies that type of extremism knows their primary targets tend to be politicians, judges, and other public officials, not Prince Harry. Of course, like any member of the royal family, Harry could potentially be a target for Islamist extremists. But Britain's intelligence agencies have an excellent record of identifying credible threats, and clearly they have not concluded that he currently faces an unusually high level of danger. That's precisely why he isn't receiving additional state-funded security for his upcoming visit. Indeed. Looking through some of the comments, Rafe, Capricorn Moon made me laugh, saying that an ordinary working man walking home at night is probably at greater risk than Prince Harry. There's probably some truth in that. Thanks as well to everyone who sent super chats. Chaos UK 2026 had me laughing with the suggestion that Meghan should launch her own brand of ginger nuts. Earlier, Real Thinking Monkey wrote that we should recruit the BBC reporter who confronted the people smuggler, suggesting she may soon lose her job simply for doing proper journalism. I actually looked her up afterwards because, to be fair, that's exactly what good reporting should look like. Brownlow001 asked, if all the heroes leave Middle-earth, who will protect the Shire? Emily for Restore commented that she knew Rafe during his Oxford days and described him as ambitious and fame-hungry from the beginning, adding that English is an ethnicity, while British is a nationality. Becky the Great asked how we've reached the point where an immigrant housing estate appears better maintained than a village that's over 1,000 years old, before thanking everyone for the program. And TP8 said that Rafe is one of his favorite commentators and encouraged everyone to subscribe to the Outspoken Substack. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that support. And, yes, since you've mentioned it, the Substack is at outspoken.life. There's my shameless plug for the day. Now it's time for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass Awards. Rafe nominated Shabir Ahmed, the convicted ringleader connected to the Rochdale grooming gangs who has now been released from prison, along with Tana Jamal, the convicted people smuggler who fled to Britain and is reportedly working illegally in Leicester. I nominated Chris Shipp for acting more like Prince Harry's spokesperson than an objective journalist. The results are now in. 10% voted for Chris Shipp, 12% chose Tana Jamal. But the overwhelming winner with 78% of the vote was Shabir Ahmed, making him today's Union Jackass. He now progresses to the weekly final, where he'll face the other winners from earlier this week. Just as a reminder, Monday's winner was Shabana Mahmood, Tuesday's was Alastair Campbell, and Wednesday's was Jess Phillips. Rafe, your nomination for Greatest Britain today is someone we're all happy to support, yes. I'm not exactly a football fanatic, I probably only watch every major tournament, but my choice is Harry Kane. Without him, I don't think we'd still be in the competition. Events like the World Cup are among the few occasions that still bring the country together, so let's get behind the team and hope they go all the way. Excellent choice, Rafe. As always, it's been a pleasure having you with us. Rafe Heidel Manku is a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. You can also follow him on X and find more of his work on YouTube. Thank you again, Rafe. We always enjoy having you on Outspoken. And finally, Dan Wooten. Outspoken is your home for independent news with no spin, no bias, and no censorship. We don't have billionaire backers or big tech funding us, which means we rely on your support. So if you've enjoyed today's program, please subscribe on YouTube, turn on notifications, and help support independent journalism.